We are continuing in our 400 years of silence called the Intertestamental Period, that period between Malachi and Luke. And tonight we're going to focus on the Menorah. Most of us know what that is, but we may not know the full history of it. In the last two sessions, we've laid the groundwork about what was going on during that 400 years. That we didn't have any scripture inspired, but we do have many historical documents that tell us about that period. There was a lot going on and in the life of the Jews and the Jewish nation. We've recovered that, and so we come to the miracle of Hanukkah tonight with the menorah is what we're going to talk about. And the first one thing I wanted to mention is God first brings up the menorah in Exodus 25. We're going to put the verses on the board. The occasion of this is, of course, Exodus. God had led the Israelites out of Egypt. He had set them free from the oppression of Egypt. They were in the wilderness. God has given them now His instructions of what He wants them to be as His people. In Exodus 20, He gave Moses the 10 Commandments that God etched on stone to bring down to the people. He continues to give them other instructions of how to live. And we get up to chapter 25. In this section here, God is instructing them to build a tabernacle in the wilderness. And this was a tabernacle of tents that, because they were nomadic at this time, they would take down, move to another area, then they would erect. It had all kinds of furniture, different things in there that God decreed. The Ark of the Covenant was in there, table of showbread, several items, and one of them was the golden lampstand. That's how it's referred to in Exodus 25. So I want to read those scriptures so you can follow along on the screen as you do that, or in your Bible. Starting at verse 31 is talking about the lampstand. God says, "Make a lampstand of pure gold and hammer out its base and shaft, and make its flower like cups, buds, and blossoms of one piece with them. 6 branches are to extend from the sides of the lampstand, 3 on one side, 3 on the other, leaving one central one." It doesn't say that specifically. 3 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms are to be on one branch, 3 on the next, and the same for all 6 branches extending from the lampstand. And on the lampstand there are to be 4 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms. 1 bud shall be under the first pair of branches extending from the lampstand, a 2nd bud under the 2nd pair, a 3rd bud under the 3rd pair, 6 branches in all. The buds and branches shall be of one piece with the lampstand hammered out of pure gold. Then make it 7 lamps and set them up on it, so that they light the space in front of it. Its wick trimmers and trays are to be of pure gold. A talent of pure gold is to be used for the lampstand and all these accessories. See that you make them according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. God was very specific of what He wanted. Interestingly, how specific He is. And of course, there is a lot of symbolism in there. Of course, gold is considered the most precious metal of that day. It's interesting to me that He decreed that they hammer it, this lampstand, out of one chunk of gold, that it wasn't to be kind of welded or stuck together. And I just think that's some of that ability that they had back then. That is amazing to me, how they knew how to hammer that out and make those branches. I've got a picture here. I think I did. I hope I did. I downloaded it. But I think most of you have seen it. It's in this For this menorah, it has 6 branches that curl up, and then there's one in the middle. We'll be breaking that down. And then he specified how much gold. He said out of 1 talent, and he gives some very distinct instructions. And then he caps it off at the end there with, make sure you do what I showed you. God intended for this to be done the way he wanted it. And so I wanted to break down what it says about the menorah. One of them made of pure hammered gold of 1 piece. And he talks about that, the base and the shaft, the flower-like cups, buds and blossoms. Years ago I learned some things about gold. When we were in our church, well, first Davis Memorial, we decided we wanted to put a new steeple on top of the church, in the middle of the church. And so we hired Campbellsville Industries to build that for us. And we wanted a cross on the top, and we wanted the cross gold-plated. And so they did all of that at Campbellsville Industries. And as I'm talking to the guy, he's telling me how they laid the sheets of gold on that and how thin they are, paper thin. And I said, well, I guess you spray a shellac or something over it to protect it. And he said, nope, that would mar the gold. The gold stands up to weather. You don't need anything on it. It retains it. He said all the gold that's on the state capitol is hammered or laid gold, and there's nothing over it. And I didn't realize that, but he said the gold is that durable, and that if you actually put anything on it, that would yellow to where you wouldn't see the gold. So that's interesting. So God wanted this made of pure hammered gold of 1 piece, the 6 branches, and I'll go ahead and talk about here. There are 2 styles of menorahs in the Bible. This is the one God decreed to the Israelites. It had 7 branches. The one we're going to talk about that happened during the silent 400 years has 9 branches, and we'll explain the difference. So God does these 6 branches, 3 on each side, 1 central stalk, is how it's to be built. Cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms. Just the intricacy of hammering out that gold to look at that's some skill. Used with wicks and lit by consecrated olive oil. There's a law in the Talmud, some of the Jewish writings, that they were not to use candles. It was supposed to be oil is all used. Now, today, you'll see in the homes, you'll see in some pictures, they do put small candles in it. We understand for ease and sake of changing them, not keeping up with oil. But the decree biblically and the tradition is it was to be consecrated olive oil. The Bible talks about it being clear olive oil, very pure. So that's what they were supposed to use. And those wicks, of course, you've had lanterns, you got to occasionally trim that wick. You got to cut off the burnt stuff. You got to raise it a little bit. So the priest under Aaron were responsible for keeping those wicks like they needed to be. The menorah was originally only burned from sunset to sunrise. It burned during the night to provide light, and then they extinguished it during the day. Made of a talent of gold. A talent of gold is approximately 75 pounds. Last I heard, gold was around 2,000 an ounce, wasn't it? That's a bunch of money. 75 times 16 is up to 5,000. Wow. Well, I don't buy it, and that's why. I have a friend that does investments, and I was asking him about precious metals like gold, because you hear all the ads. He said gold is for rich people buying it. It's 5,000 an ounce. That's $80. That's $80,000 a pound, and my math's not good enough. Times 75 pounds. That's $56,000, $60,000 or more. No, it's more than that. 600.
Over $500,000.
Yeah, over $500,000 today. That this would be. That's That's amazing. And earlier, he tells Moses to collect the gold and silver and stuff from the people. I think a lot of them carried it out of Egypt when they left. I've referred to the olive oil, clear oil, pressed olives for the light. That's found in Exodus chapter 27. It gives a little more explanation of how to put this together. Let me see, find that real quick. Oil for the lampstand. Command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so that the lamps may be kept burning. In the tent of meeting outside the curtain that is in front of the testimony, Aaron and his sons are to keep the lamps burning before the Lord from evening until morning. This is to be a lasting ordinance among the Israelites for the generations to come. So this is something God decreed for them to keep in front of them. They said to stay lit, maintained by Aaron and the priests. This is the tabernacle in the wilderness. This is a depiction of it. And you can see there in the middle, that green bar is where the golden lampstand stood in the holy place. And of course, that was surrounded by curtains. Then there was the back area where the Ark of the Covenant is, with the Holy of Holies. That's where the priest only went one time a year, only the high priest. And when he went in, they would tie a rope around his ankle in case he had a heart attack. Nobody was permitted to go get him, so they would drag him out. And of course, the Holy of Holies, the priest would go in and minister, but only the priest. And then in the outside court is where the people would go and worship. So that's the layout, and that's where the lampstand was, and the table of showbread, the incense altar, those things. And that would be torn down every time they moved and re-erected. And God was very specific on that, about the wood to use for the poles, how they be covered, how to be ornate, everything. God decreed how he wanted it. So that's where the menorah sat. Then we have, I'm repeating myself, I jump ahead of my thoughts, but every time it was moved, the tabernacle had to be set up. And my troublesome mind, I think, well, the priests couldn't, nobody could go in it but the priest and the high priest and the holy one. But how did they build it? They had to get inside to erect it all. I said, so we kind of have a loophole there. When they were built, I guess it wasn't the Holy of Holies until it was built, because the workers had to get in there and set all that stuff up. But that's where I asked too many questions. Then we know it was Solomon who built the first temple in Jerusalem. David wanted to build a temple for God in Jerusalem, but God wouldn't allow him because he was a warrior, and God didn't want a warrior building the temple. And so when Solomon became king, God allowed him to build the temple. And so that, when they did that, the tabernacle was moved into the temple. These same areas were set up within the temple, and they put in other menorahs at that time, and they had more than one menorah. I believe they had up to 7 of them that were in there. But they were the light for the temple, and besides being a symbolic representation that God decreed, they were also practical in giving light. The temple menorah was pretty big. It stood 5 foot 3 inches tall. And that was solid gold, remember, that was hammered out. So it was a pretty big piece of furniture there. There were several of them. Candles weren't to be used, only consecrated clear olive oil. Wicks drew from a central oil repository. And I think we get into some of the symbolism there. There was just one place where the oil was, but of course the wicks drew it up through the branches like a wick does. The center one, and I'll get to that word here in a minute, was called the shamash, and it was never extinguished. It was the primary one. And it represented, I'm sure, the eternal God, that it was lit. And shamash in Hebrews means helper or servant. It was used to light the other 6. So it stayed lit, and then they would use it to light the others. And a pilot light, there you go. And God's our pilot, isn't he? And so that brings out that God being that one that never is extinguished, he's eternal, and he gives light to everybody else. So much meaning there, and all the light draws from a central repository. It all comes from God. A lot of meaning can be gleaned out of that. That menorah became the symbol of Israel, and in 1948 it was officially adopted as the symbol of the new Israel, but all through that time it represented. And so what we see in history is when these armies would come in, one of the things they would do is carry the menorahs away that represented the nation of Israel. They carried them away because they were gold. I mean, 75 pounds of gold, even back then, was worth it. But they were also doing it to defeat the kingdom, so they would carry the menorahs away. Nebuchadnezzar was the first one, and then they were brought back. And the menorah symbolizes Israel's charge to be a light unto the nations. That's one of the things God intended, for the Israelites to be the one to proclaim him to the world, and they didn't really do that. They, in their mind, they kind of kept their primitive notions that God was a nationalistic God. In other words, Jehovah was the God of the Jews. And so their thought was the Egyptians would have had their own God. The Medo-Persians would have had their God. Everybody had their own God, was the mentality of that day. That wasn't what God intended, of course. God wanted to be everybody's God. He made the Israelites his people, but they were to spread that to others. But they kind of got selfish or whatever. They kept him to themselves, and they didn't spread the word like they were supposed to. Then continuing on, we're up to this date. We like I said, we've studied how the Babylonians carried them away. Then the Medo-Persians conquered the Babylonians, took over the land. Then the Greeks came to power, and under Alexander the Greek, first his father, he was of Macedonia. I can't think of his first name now, but anyway, his father established the Grecian Empire, but then he died. Alexander became the next leader at a young age, and he developed a well-trained army, and they swept through the land. And so we got up to this person, Antiochus Epiphanes, that we've talked about, and we've seen in Daniel where it talks about the desolation of the abomination of desolation. Antiochus Epiphanes was a strong proponent of Hellenization. The other people before him had kind of let the Jews and the Greek religion of Hellenization, it's called, or Hellenizing, kind of coexist. Many of the Jews embraced the Hellenistic ideas, and they turned into some of the kind of the liberal wing of the Jews, including the Sadducees. They didn't accept the resurrection, that there would be a resurrection, any of that kind of stuff. They sided with the Greeks. The conservative ones who didn't want to adopt Grecian religion, they fomented the Pharisees. The Pharisees were from the conservative wing. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees didn't get along. They were like political Republicans and Democrats, that anyone was doing anything right. So that was part of the battle going on. Well, Antiochus Epiphanes really worked to enforce Hellenization over Israel. And we talked about it. He did that after being humiliated down in Egypt. He conquered Egypt, but then a Roman leader came in and said, I don't care if you conquered it, you're leaving. And he had such a powerful army, Antiochus had no choice, so he kind of tucked his tail behind his legs. He went up to Judea, and he started enforcing their Hellenization on there. And part of that was to go into the temple, take all the menorahs out. They weren't allowed to have the menorahs. They weren't allowed to practice their religion. And gravy on it all, he brought a pig in and sacrificed a pig, the most unclean animal in the Jewish faith, on the altar. That was the abomination of desolation that Daniel talks about. And that is when you read that, it is a parallel event that's going to occur. Antiochus Epiphanes did that in the temple around 169 BC, but there's going to be a more universal abomination of desolation in the end times when the Antichrist rises, starts exerting his power, and that will be the end times abomination of desolation. So this period is a preview or a precursor to what's going to happen in the end times. So he came in, he takes all the menorahs out, he tells them they can't worship. Well, that just riles up the Jewish faithfuls, largely from the family of the Maccabeans, and it's called the Maccabean Revolt. And the leader of that was Judas Maccabeus. He was the son of Simon, who, all starts with an M, Malchus. Matthias was the leader of the Maccabeans, and he was one of his sons. But Judas was a very astute military leader and an astute politician. He knew how to fight, but he also knew how to wrangle things around and get his way. So by this time, the Greeks were starting to lose some of their power and control, and the Maccabeans led a revolt and were able to overcome the Greeks in that area, and they retook over the temple. They gained control of it again. So when they did that, they wanted to reestablish their worship, of course, but there were no menorahs. They'd all been carried away. So finding no gold menorahs, they had leftover iron spears, and this is tradition from the Midrash. It says that initially they took those iron spears and fashioned a menorah from them initially, and then as they gained prestige, power, and wealth, they went back to building the gold ones. But initially they had to fashion what they had. Some say they made some wood ones. Others, this Midrash tradition is that they found hollow spears, and they used those spears to fashion a menorah so that they could have it lit. Well, of course, that menorah is supposed to stay lit all night. Well, when they were looking around in the temple, besides not having any menorahs, they didn't have much oil. They only found enough oil for 1 day's worth to burn. Well, mainly because they had plenty of olive oil, but it had to be consecrated olive oil, and there was a process to go through. So they put the oil that they had in the menorah they had, and they knew it was just a day's worth. They knew how much it took. But that oil lasted for 8 days, and that's the miracle of the menorah miracle, and this is the Hanukkah session we're talking about. And so that's why that occurred during this Maccabean period, and it stayed lit, certainly that central one, God. So it was a source of great hope for them, of encouragement about having the menorah back, their symbol of the nation, and that it lasted those 8 days. At the end of the 8 days, by then, they had gone through the process, and they were able to consecrate more oil, press it from the olives, do what they needed to do to concentrate it, or consecrate it. So then they had oil to continue on. But that's what made it so special at that time. Okay? So the miraculously the oil lasted for 8 days, and it had enough time, and that's the miracle of Hanukkah. And it's a very special day for the Israelites, for the Jews. As the Maccabees gained power and wealth, they then created gold ones. They made them back. The 8-day miracle led to the creation of a home menorah. Remember, the ones previously I talked about were in the temple, and they were big ones. So after this, wanting people to celebrate, they created a smaller one that was in the home, and they made it a 9-branch menorah. One, they didn't want to replicate the one in the temple. That was holy for God's service in the temple. So they didn't want to duplicate it, so that's one reason. And the reason they went to 9 was to celebrate the 8 days where the oil lasted through that whole period, with the central one again representing God. And so that's what they did to distinguish it from the Temple Mounts and for the people. Hanukkah is an 8-day celebration from December 4th to December 12th. Each day of Hanukkah, another branch of the menorah is lit. And one of the commentaries I read, if there's children in the home, they would let the children take turns lighting it. And that was part of their faith practice and learning the story. So they would light that. The 9th one always stays lit. That represents God. That center 9th one is that word I shared with you, shamash, which means helper or servant. It was used to light the other ones. And it just, again, is that picture of our light flows from our Heavenly Father. It's not created of ourselves. It's not created external to us or Him. It comes from God the Father. And we don't think of God as a helper so much, but He is a helper. The Bible says He's an ever-present help in danger. So He is a help. He's more than a helper, but He is a helper. He's the God, of course. But in that, He loves to help His people. So He's a great and wonderful God. So the Hanukkah, that lighting of the menorah, for them today is a rededication of their commitment to faith and family. It's a very special event. There's no reason we couldn't do it in the Christian faith. It celebrates that same God. It celebrates the same principles, even though that special time during the silent 400 years doesn't mean as much to us. We could use that as part of our celebration of Christmas season. A few other things. There's many meanings given for the branches. It's interesting. God did not say this is what it stands for. And it's interesting how God does that, just like I talked about communion. And in some ways, He's so detailed, just like He was, about what the menorah was supposed to look like. And then on other things, He just kind of says, do this, and He doesn't tell you how to do it. So He doesn't give a meaning for the branches, but there was a lot proposed. Some think, especially early on, the 7 branches represented the 7 days of creation. The 7 heavens, that's part of Jewish teaching. You remember Paul talked about going up to the 3rd heaven. Okay, that's part of what he's talking about there. The planets, with the center branch being the sun. That starts sounding like, to me, bleeding over into some Roman mythology or maybe Greek on that one. But it does symbolize the divine light of creation and Israel's mission as a light unto the nations. That, I think that's next. And we'll get it. And then I said where the original 7 or later 9 branch menorah, the center branch, was never to be extinguished. It's eternal. And so it represents God there. The modern home, the 9 branches, distinguish it from the temple menorah to celebrate the miracle of oil lasting 8 days. And so we get into the summary. These are things I gleaned. First, this is a recap. When the Israelites were delivered from Egypt, God commanded them to build a tabernacle. And that included the golden lampstand. Among the things the tabernacle included was a golden lampstand, a menorah. Israel was to be the light unto the nations. That's found actually in Isaiah. Let me turn to those verses and read them. Isaiah 42:6 is the first one. There's 49. I'm going to keep my finger there. 42:6. Back up one more page here. Okay, verse 6. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles, to open eyes that are blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the king dungeon those who sit in the darkness. That was verse 7. I went a little far. Verse 6 ends, I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles. So there it's very clear. They weren't meant to keep it within the Jewish faith. They were to spread it to the Gentiles. Then we get 49:6 says, He says, God, it is too small a thing for you to be my servant to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring my salvation to the ends of the earth. So that was God's intention for them. He chose them out of all the peoples of the world, based really on Abraham's faith as the father of faith. And He blessed them tremendously, but He blessed them with the purpose of being His people to share about Him to a world. So that was their task from the start. We have some verses that we're aware of. In John 8:12, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And I'll paraphrase this down just to the phrase. In John 9:5, Jesus said, while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Okay? So what does that mean? That means when He left, when He went to heaven, the light went with Him. Okay? He's the light of the world. Light was gone. But He had a plan. Matthew 5:4 says, Jesus talking to His people said, you are the light of the world. We have Christ living within us when we accept Christ as our Savior. And so we become His light in the world. That verse goes on, is the one that says a city cannot be hid under a bushel. It needs to be up and illuminate. But Jesus did this translation. He said, I'm the light of the world. Jesus is that light. God is light. But He said, that's while I'm here in the world. You are the light of the world. So Jesus has passed that same task of the Israelites to His church. We are His church. He created us. He created us to be the light of the world. It's always been God's desire that His followers be a light shining in the darkness, the world. We are His light, and we are to proclaim the light, Jesus Christ. So we better not point our fingers too hard at the Jews unless we make sure we're doing it right too, and we could do a better job. So we don't need to get haughty and be down on them, because God said, okay, you got a chance. But we are to be the light. And then last it says, when He ascended, we became His light to a world needing to know the light. And so there we know that sin is represented as darkness. It is darkness. And the light came into the world and brought that light to all men, which is Jesus Christ. And now we carry that torch on, as it were. So that's the study that I put together there. It's a lot of information real quick, but we're almost at 10 till now. Any of your thoughts? Do you see any symbolism there I didn't mention? Any meaning to you from the menorah or from God's desire for His people, both the Israelites and us? we need to remember and take from our study of the minor prophets God's judgment. God, we saw that over and over. Every book, in a way, of the minor prophets was a broken record. I've called you to do this. I've blessed you in this way, but you turn from me. Turn back to me. Our judgment's coming, over and over again. That was basically the message. And even though the Israelites were God's people, He loved them dearly. He has always preserved a remnant. A just God administered justice. He told them, you're going to be carried into exile for 70 years. They were carried into exile for 70 years. He told them over and over again, this is coming. God continues to tell us that judgment day is coming. Revelation 20 talks about how the sea will give up their dead and everybody will stand before the great white throne of judgment, and Jesus will open the book of life, to see if your name is written in the book. That's that final judgment. For Christians that are in the book, it's not a judgment between heaven and hell, but it is a determination, and it'd be just like us going before a judge, and you got people did wrong, did right, and the judge looks at it, looks at the charges against us, said, oh, those charges don't apply to you, you're free to go. So that's what it'll be like at the great white throne of judgment, except that we will be judged on what we did with the light we've received. God has given us this challenge, this task, and intends us to use it. So that's part of the lesson I get from the study of the minor prophets in this section here. God is loving, He is patient, He is kind, He is extremely patient, but His patience will run out. And there is coming a day when He's going to call people, and there will be nothing after that. As it is now, He's more than the God of second chances. I don't know how many chances we've had in our lives, but there is coming a day of no more chances. That'd be a pretty good sermon to preach, no more chances. So I hope you've gotten some good information out of this silent 400 years. I've encapsulated it. A lot of it is telescoped, because some of these empires we looked at and that came in, what they did can be explained really quickly, but it happened over many, many years, over 400 years all totaled. And at the end of that silent period is when the Romans came in, defeated the Greeks, and they were in power when Jesus was here. So it laid that groundwork of what's happening, and I just find it interesting. I hear about Hanukkah, I hear about the Menorah, and that this kind of helps me know where that came from, why it is sacred to the Jews, what the meaning is, and how we can apply that to our lives. Any other comment? Anybody got anything?